It's almost as if he can't understand why everyone else can't do it. It's a bit like Jim Clark, who apparently couldn't understand why no one else could go as quickly. But, he is very good.
I've watched him testing at Silverstone, and particularly going through Beckett's, a very fast right, left, right sequence of corners. And the speed that he carries into the corner, I mean, I stood there thinking, I don't believe what I've seen. He is so fast into the corner.
Well, it's nothing sort of extra special. It's just a way that he controls the car almost with a throttle, instead of where I think the majority of drivers that I've known, someone like Damon, I know David, Gerhard as well, Mika Häkkinen, exactly the same. When they brake, you brake, you change down the gears, and then you might go on and off the throttle. And I think Ayrton was the biggest example of that. When he used to be in the middle of a corner, his throttle movement was so quick, and he was always on the throttle. Where Michael has this braking, changing down, then he's constantly on the throttle straight away.
Even if every driver was driving a white car with a white helmet, we could still just about see the technique of Michael Schumacher. It wouldn't be easy, though, and to get a much better idea, we need to look at data recordings taken from the controls, from the steering, particularly the throttle, and also, of course, the brakes. And we've had a rare opportunity to obtain data from the British Grand Prix qualifying from both Michael Schumacher and Johnny Herbert's car. This blue trace is the throttle. When it's right at the top, it's full throttle, and so now we can see the accelerator building up a section of flat-out running before then lifting off and then braking down for the next corner. It's important with a Formula One car to be progressive with the throttle, and so we don't see it just going vertically up, we see it progressively increasing, and that's particularly important through this corner, Bridge Corner, because that is taken at 160 miles an hour, and technique is all important to save time. Michael Schumacher approaches on full throttle with the blue line at about 160 miles an hour. Eases back, and then he progressively increases to be on full throttle on the exit, before then lifting abruptly, of course, to brake for Priory. Now comparing this with Johnny Herbert's throttle position, we can see that in fact Herbert keeps on full throttle for longer. Certainly no lacking in bravery, but then he has a much bigger lift to slow the car down more, before, slightly raggedly, increasing it back to full throttle again. Now looking at the speed trace, the blue line of Michael Schumacher shows his speed increasing all the way up to 160 miles an hour, and then in fact it really rather levels off, all the way through the corner, hovering around the 160 miles an hour point, before dropping abruptly away again as he brakes for Priory. Now looking at Herbert's speed trace, he's a little slower out of the previous corner, but gradually makes up ground, and so he's virtually as fast on the very approach to Bridge. But because of that much bigger lift on the throttle, his speed then drops down quite significantly. He's 5 miles an hour slower in the middle of the corner. Now looking at the steering trace, we can see just how close to the limit the drivers are. On the approach to the corner, the trace is fairly smooth. But then in the middle of the corner, we can see from the zigzag lines just how much correction Schumacher is having to make for tiny slides that can't actually be seen, not obviously anyway, from the outside of the car. Now looking at Johnny Herbert's steering input, on the straight it's much the same, but in the middle of the corner he's not so near the edge, and so the trace is smoother. As a result, on this corner alone, Schumacher was 0.2 of a second faster than Herbert, and in fact in qualifying, over the whole lap, beat him by 1.5 seconds, or 100 metres at the end of the lap.
I think the main ability I have is that I have a good feeling for the limit, a very consistent feeling for the limit, and I'm able to run the car for almost 100% on the limit, and that's probably the difference in style, where someone has the ability to do that in the entry of the corner, but not in mid-corner, and then the exit again, or the other way around, and I can almost do this all the way around the corner.
And then at the end of 95, Schumacher comes, and I remember he had his first test at Estoril, and I think he said some very complimentary things about the car.
Yeah.
And were you at that test?
Yes.
What sort of impression did Michael make?
Well, he tested the 95 car, both with the V12 and we had what we call a mule with the then brand new V10 installed in another car, identical car, but one with a V12, one with a V10. And it was very interesting to me because, first of all, he was super quick in the V12 car and actually said to me, wow, I could have won the championship easier with this car than I did in the Benetton. So, that was his comment. I mean, take it for what it's worth, but that was a comment. So you think, okay, that's pretty good, that we're not too far away. Then he gets in the V10 car and he's driving the V10 and he doesn't like it as much. I said, what's the problem, Michael? Why don't you like it? Because it doesn't have the engine braking that the V12's got. No, that's because it's a better engine. It's more efficient. It's got less drag inside the engine. Yes, but that's how I drive it round the corner. What do you mean? Well, when I go into a corner, I balance the car on the throttle. So when I lift off, and if I've got engine drag, I can bring the back round on the car and I put my foot down and I can pull it back. I can play with it on the throttle. I can't do that with the V10 because when I lift off, I don't get the same reaction. Wow. Okay. Now this comment is now 180 degrees different to what Berger and Lazy have been telling us for the last year or two. They've been saying the problem with the V12 is in a high-speed corner, I lift off and the engine unbalances the car. The engine unsettles the car because there's so much braking from the engine. So we're now faced with a guy who is world champion, blindingly quick, and wants it completely different. And you kind of want to go away to the garage and smack your head against the wall and think, Jesus Christ, what do we do now? But what happened was, I would say I tried to speak to Michael and I tried to put across my viewpoint that for me, the way the car is quick is if you can plant the back end. If I can give you absolute maximum traction at the back at all times, you can open the throttle sooner and you will be quicker. Now, Michael didn't drive like that. Michael drove what I call off the front of the car. He wanted a front end, but absolutely just turn the wheel and bang into the corner. And he would kind of look after the back. All the other guys are saying, yeah, but we don't like that because when we do that, then the back end comes round. Michael was quick, but as I say, I didn't like the way he had the car set up. For me, it wasn't the way to go. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall when he drove for Braun, was it? Alongside
the early
Rosberg.
Mercedes years, 2010.
Yeah. And because he quite often was nowhere near as quick as Rosberg then. And I thought, this is strange, there's something going on here. My theory, and it is only my theory, that Rosberg was like most of the guys who wants a car that's nicely planted at the back and then will find a way to get as best he can around the understeer. Michael didn't like that. And when they did set the car up for Michael, he was quicker than Rosberg, but he wasn't overall quick. And so I don't know, but I just think that Michael's approach to it was good when he was young because he had his reactions were phenomenal. But as he got a bit older, I'm not sure that system worked so well. But all these guys, it was hard to find their car input. Because for me, certainly in Formula One, it's the driver's input to what he wants from the car that's very, very important, not just whether he's a quick driver or not. And I suspect that's where, I don't know, but I suspect that's where Lewis Hamilton has got today. He's really understood the car and gets a lot of feedback from his engineers and gives them a lot of feedback. And he's now developed, he's another, I've not worked with him, but he's obviously right up there in the driver stakes.
It's his last last lap. He's currently in second position on the grid, and he crosses the line 0.2 of a second off.
Drivers, incredible.
Yeah, well, it was certainly a bit of a rally crosser of a lap for Michael Schumacher.
Aber sei mal dahingestellt. Hier nochmal aus dem Silberpfeilkanal das Bild.
Ja, das Grüne da rechts, das ist ein Teppich und der ist im...
From Schumacher on this time. In fact, after the free practice this morning, oh, and a big slide into the stadium there.
He laid rubber as he went left.
He lost his breath, it was kicked out of him, and Jos Verstappen as well was saying how difficult all there he sees Schumacher.
Interesting to see how quickly the Ferrari seems to be getting the best out of their tyres. Look at that dirt track.
Control here, and as the drivers are going around, the concentration has to be absolutely immaculate, and he still keeps doing it. I think he's enjoying it.
Listen to the wheel spin, fighting for traction. Really, in these conditions, all you can hope to do is just short shift and get the thing into fourth gear as soon as possible. At the end of the day, he lost 20 seconds between the end of the straight and coming back across start-finish line. But look at that. Just puts his right foot, buries it into the throttle.
Could the conditions be changeable like this? I have to say that he's some way off the pace of the Williams-Renaults, 1.2 seconds off in the dry as he came round, so he won't actually set a time. Look at this, Schumacher sliding it out of the... That's how do you impress the teams, because they're parked just down there. So it does look as though most of these times are going to stay the same. Villeneuve in 5th place.
Oh, Schumacher, absolutely again, stunning car control. Opposite lock one way, dirt track back the other way, and still stayed on the track.
Sotto voce about his chances here in Australia in the Ferrari. He's really going for it. He's been saying he would be very, very lucky to win, and he's